Welcome to the Driving Change podcast on the Evergreen Podcast Network, where we live at the intersection of neuroscience and storytelling. If you love great stories and you love understanding the mindset it takes to be a world-class change agent, then join us as our fascinating guests from all walks of life unpack their unique journeys of perseverance and passion, of expertise and experience, and be inspired to use your own story to drive change. Welcome back to the Driving Change podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield. And as you know, I'm always looking for really unique and interesting guests to bring on the show. People have unique backstories, and it's their stories that really resonate with you, the listener. We've heard that over and over and over again. And today's guest is no different. Pat Del Medico is somebody that not only did he hail from a similar area of the world that I did in northeastern Ohio, but his life journey has taught him so many life lessons. From where he started to going up and growing up essentially and being an executive in multiple companies, from medical device, biotech. He's now leading one of the larger insurance companies in the country as the COO. He's down in Florida. I'm a little jealous of him right now. Well, of course, it's getting warmer up here in Ohio, but he's hailing from Sarasota, Florida, even though he's not straight far from his Buckeye roots. I'm sure that he still bleeds scarlet and gray. We'll find out as we go along. But I'm excited for him to unpack his story, his leadership philosophy, his life philosophy, and the mindset that he uses for himself, for his team, for his kids, for his life, and how we can learn from him to live life a little bit more purposeful. So, Pat, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you on.
It's an honor to be here, Jeff. Thanks so much. OH.
IO.
Yeah.
We just lost half of Michigan. That's okay.
That's okay. That's all right.
We didn't want those listeners anyway.
So it's an honor. I've been listening, obviously, to you guys for a while, and I'm humbled to be here and just really excited to talk to you today.
Well, that's great. I can't wait to really dive into your story. Now, the only thing that we start with that I warn you with ahead of time is just that we want to know you. We want to know little Pat growing up in Northeast Ohio and what made you who you are. Where do those values come from? What was that origin story like? And as we go into more of your work story and the things you've accomplished, I think it'll have a lot more purpose behind it, knowing where you came from. Tell us that story.
You bet. Yeah. So grew up in Akron, Ohio. Love my roots in Akron. Grew up a baby of 6 kids. So immediately you said, you might lose some listeners. I'm probably judged already. The baby of the family. I was spoiled, but also, like I used to tell my brothers and sisters, they beat me up every once in a while as well. But I had a wonderful, loving family. We were very, very Catholic. Had 12 years of Catholic education before I went off to college. And so that actually molded a lot of what we're about. We had 6 kids living in one house with one bathroom. So you can imagine the connectivity, and I'll talk a little bit about that then, how we all got to really appreciate each other and also sort of at times, beat each other up, like I said. I was just blessed to have amazing parents that I don't know to this day how they all kept it together, quite frankly, balancing 6 kids. At one time, I think I was sort of the mistake, by the way. I was 5.5 years after my last sister. And at one point, my mom and dad had 5 kids in higher education, and they were taking care of that on their own. And my mom did not work. She was a stay-at-home mom, but I can't say she didn't work because she busted her butt taking care of all of us. My dad owned his own interior design company. It was called Shadell Interiors in Akron, Ohio. And he was an entrepreneur. Company was started by my grandmother. Crazy story. My dad was a Phi Psi at Wittenberg University. And my grandmother saw his fraternity house, thought it was a shamble, and she started doing some decorating there and cleaned it up a little bit. The president of Wittenberg sort of got interested in what she was doing, and she sort of helped him with his own house. And the next thing you know, I think it's almost 50 years later that Shadell is now in its 3rd generation with my brothers and sisters.
Wow.
Pretty neat story. And And again, that's sort of how I got rooted. When I finished high school, went to DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana, small liberal arts school. And that's where I met my wife of 33 years and met some of the greatest relationships I've ever had in my life. They call it the DePaul Mafia. We're like, 1,800 students or whatever, but incredible connections there. And then from there, I started my career.
Wow, what an interesting journey. So I'm just curious as a follow-up question. So you had a Catholic grandmother redecorating a Lutheran college dorm.
Right. Yeah.
This is very interesting, right? It's
and especially back then, right? So that was
right.
yeah. But I will just say we called her Nano, and her attention to detail is also something that probably resonated with my dad, that passed it down to all of us. And then also her ability to connect with people on all different levels was just something that, again, was transcended through my family. And I think if you would say to people, and I just go back to my dad, unfortunately, he just recently passed away at the age of 92 a couple of years ago. But, there's probably 500 plus people at his funeral. And all I remember is everybody coming through that had a story about how my dad had an impact on them. And that's just something that I hope someday I could achieve maybe 25% of that, because there's no way I could ever achieve what he did. But that's something that I want to try to look forward to and try to continue to build in my career and in my life.
Yeah, and I love that. We talk a lot about it. It's so hard sometimes, and especially in our culture, where everything is you're so the treadmill's on 11, seems like, for everybody all the time, and it's the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And sometimes it's hard to pause and look a little bit longer in the rearview mirror at the journey that you've taken so far,
Right.
and the lessons that you've learned along the way, because we're all moving so fast. And thinking about the perspective of your father in 92 years, and it's a shame sometimes, right, that we don't pause until we're at someone's funeral where we get to really hear that purpose and that impact. But I bet you, if you're like me, when you have the chance to do that, it starts to make you take some inventory on, what have I learned in my journey?
Yeah.
And am I passing that along? So let's jump off there. And so let's go back into that first. I like to ask people sometimes, from college to the first 5 years out in the workforce, if you were just to reflect back on, and now you're hovering over Pat and those 22 to 29, 30-year-old, what did you learn in that time that maybe you hadn't really stopped and paused and ever considered that you might have learned?
Yeah. I think it was, so I started my career with Procter & Gamble out of college. I always tell people what P&G always did is it taught you an amazing sales process. So I thought I could always be a good salesperson, but P&G sort of showed me sort of a process, right? And then I went on to do some medical sales with Baxter and Stryker. And you talk about reflection. I think one of the biggest lessons I learned was halfway through my career with Stryker. I was a 100% commission salesperson. And I remember I was selling in Columbus, Ohio, and I remember I was so driven about the sale and the numbers. And, that was my goal. And so every time I walked in the operating room, I was focused on selling that surgeon or that staff my product. What was always about me and my product and like the impact that it could have on them. And eventually I got promoted to go into management. And I was running a couple product lines. And I remember going back into the field. And when I didn't have that pressure or focus of selling that product, I started to realize that it wasn't about me. It was about, how do I connect with the end buyer, which was the surgeon or the staff. And so this is, I'm probably in my late 20s, early 30s. And it wasn't until then that I started to transition to, it's about them. Everything we do, in my opinion, in life is about the other person. Like, how do you connect with them? And so I just started asking surgeons, what's your background? How did you get here? What are your needs? And in my previous life, I was all about, here's my product, right? And what I realized is as we started pulling that layer back, I started connecting with these folks, right? on a totally different level than just a transaction. And I remember a couple of my sales reps saying, "Wow, that was really good." And I was thinking to myself, "Man, that was so simple. All I was doing was just asking somebody what they wanted and what they were about." So that's probably the one thing. I mean, if there was one sort of transition in life that I really made an impact on me, it was that. And then I started building on that from there.
What do you think it is that, obviously, the listeners who know us well know we study this, right? The neuroscience of effective communication, what's going on between the ears when two people are engaged, whether it's in a sales conversation or a parent to child or a coaching conversation with an employee. Well, why do you think, because what you just said, everyone who's done any type of sales in the world that's listening just went, well, yeah, no doubt. That's a Geico commercial, Pat. Everybody knows that. But why is it, if everybody knows that very few do it? Why do you think that is?
I can tell you right now, I have a couple of folks that are younger people working for us that have said, this is sad, but they don't know how to care about it. Like they don't, some people just don't care, right? But they also are fearful. I think they're fearful of being interesting versus just being interested. And I think that's the key, right? So many people say, "Oh yeah, I can do that. I can do that." Well, why aren't you doing it? Right. And I think they're not doing it because they're fearful that if I'm going to start to talk to Jeff, I've got to be like this superstar person. Even today, preparing for this or talking, my wife and I were listening to it, and I'm like, wow, you got people that write books and people that present to national audiences. And I'm like, I'm not that guy. But I started talking to you, and I want to be interested in how this all came about, right? And I started pulling back that layer as well. So I think it comes down to making sure that you understand that everybody you connect with has a passion to feel significant. And if you don't recognize that early, you miss an amazing opportunity for a connection that could potentially last you a lifestyle.
So let's go a little deeper into that topic, because it's been a while since we've talked about this on our show and with a guest specifically, but since you're out living this every day, we talk a lot about that the brain is built biologically for self-preservation. You can't help it. Its number one primary role and function is survival. And so you wake up every day in this self-preservation, risk mitigation mode. And as humans, we're bent toward the opposite. Our biology is almost built against us caring about someone else more than we care about ourselves. And so then when you're in a pressure situation and stress is elevated, you will communicate from your own highest level of training, knowledge, and self-preservation. So if you think about that, all of these things are pitted against us.
Right.
And yet the skill of being able to actually, because when you really peel the onion back on people, tell me if you disagree, but most people actually do care about other people. They really do.
Oh no. It's inherently there. They just don't know how to, again, make that connection. So many people we talk about are afraid of small talk. They don't value it. But I would argue to my team and friends, how did you make your best friends? Small talk, right? And then through that, what were you doing? You were asking about them. You were asking about their family. You were asking, where did they grow up? These are really simple things. To your point, like people are like, oh my gosh, I've heard this before. I'm like, well, do you put it to use and do you put it in practice daily? This might be bad, but I'll go there, and you can stop me. But sometimes it's okay to be selfish that way, right? So, and what I mean by that is it's okay if you go into a conversation, you care about that person, but selfishly, your end goal is to maybe make a sale, right? That's okay. But you have to be real. You can't be fake. And what I've learned is the more real you are, the closer you are with that, with that client or that customer. We always say here at Shepherd Insurance, treat your clients like friends or family. And I truly believe in that. And if you do that, and you have to walk the walk. If you do that, your end result actually ends up being what you were selfishly trying to do, which is make a connection with somebody and potentially sell them something. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And what we talk a lot about around here is if you have a selling mindset, if you're in a sales role, you've already lost. You've got to have not a selling mindset, but a serving by solving mindset, because the solving part makes it mutually beneficial.
No doubt. Yeah.
And if I can do that, I don't have to be selfish, because I get what I need, but I'm also giving what they need. And then, because if you just take what you need, and you can, by the way, there's people that can do that. They convince somebody to buy something they didn't really need or want or could afford, and they win. Well, you're not going to live a very long existence feeling very good about yourself, and you certainly aren't going to build the kind of deep relationships that are meaningful to your purpose, and you're going to feel slimy about it.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be around that person, right?
And there's no longevity there, right? So your window of success, if you want to call it success, is limited, right?
It is. It's short-lived and it's very unfulfilling. And we know that. But that's why I have folks that, like yourself, who've lived a really good, successful life in this world. We try to identify scientifically what a lot of great communicators do intuitively, so they can do it intentionally, so they can do it more consistently. And the science behind this is what trips people up. They don't recognize it in the moment, and so they don't know how to combat it. And it's a skill you have to, like everything, a skill you have to create. The behavior has to become habitual, and most people, like you, have done it intuitively over your career, and you just learned intuitively how to do it.
And I think, that is to your point, it doesn't happen overnight, right? Like I was just telling you, for me, it didn't trigger until I was probably almost 10 years into professional workforce that I was realizing, like, hey, I've got I knew all of a sudden it clicked, and then I had to build on it. I also oftentimes, and maybe this is going squirrel a little bit, I always say, read the room. We don't read the room. Like I was telling you, like I was going into like an operating room and saying, you're gonna buy my product, and I wasn't reading, like, okay, where did this surgeon go to school? What's going on inside the halls of the hospital right now? When I go meet with a client, the first thing I do beforehand is I look them up on LinkedIn. All the things that you're taught in sales, right? But one of the things that also happens is if you sit in that client's office, you can see family pictures. Maybe they're a Browns fan, maybe they're a Buckeye fan. Anything you could connect with. And I think
maybe they're a Bengals fan. I'm just saying.
Bengals fan. Maybe you miss that. And one of my, now that I'm just thinking about it, it's crazy. Chad Bryans, that works for you guys.
Yeah.
Chad and I got connected through a mutual friend, John Serpilla. And he and I were talking about potentially having you guys do a talk. And behind his backdrop was a Michigan helmet.
Yeah, we don't have that high standards here. Anybody can work here.
Yeah. And we started bantering back and forth. And I said, so what, where are you from? And long story, just through a couple of questions and being interested, we made a connection that his best friend in high school was one of my first hires at Stryker.
Oh, wow.
And through that 20-minute conversation, he gave me that guy's contact information. We hadn't connected in almost 30 years. And here we were making a 3-way connection with each other, right?
Right.
But it only started with the fact that I noticed that he had a Michigan helmet. I was like, okay, I just got to ask, right? What's your connection there? And through that, all of a sudden, we had this incredible, Michigan connection. And so it's a simple story, and it happens to people. But I would tell you that I'm lucky enough that it happens to me on a pretty regular basis. And it so happens that I think it happens because I just happen to ask the question, right?
Well, let me underscore that, and then we can move on to the next topic. But the underscore there is the most interesting people are the most interested people. That's what you're getting at, right? If you really want to find someone that after the conversation, when you meet somebody like, man, that was a really interesting person, 9 times out of 10, they were probably more interested in you, in the way they communicated with you, and the way they wove their story into your story, the questions that they asked about you. And we like to say a lot in the sales world is, what's the secret to having your customers or clients believe that you care about them? There's no secret. You actually have to care about them.
Yeah. And I get that from I'll go back to my roots real quick. My dad demonstrated on a regular basis that it was never about him. it was always about the people that he was talking to. And so, again, like I said, he had an interior design business, but he did high-end executives from the rubber capital, right? Akron, Goodyear, Firestone, Goodrich. But he did banks. He did individual homes. He never ever discriminated against who he would work with or how he treated everybody with respect. And I will never forget, we always had these big family dinners, right? There'd be 8 of us. And he would tell us stories about who he interacted with that day. And to me, that's sort of how I got interested in knowing everybody's story. And I don't know if you know, there's a Chick-fil-A. Every Chick-fil-A employee has to watch this video, and it's called "Everyone Has a Story." And I highly suggest it for anybody that hasn't seen it. But it basically has no verb, no words, just music, and it says, Jeff, single father of 2, just got diagnosed with cancer. Patrick, just lost his job today. It's not all sad, it's like 2 couples just decided to retire today and they're celebrating with a lunch. The bottom line is everybody has a story, right? And so in our world of customer service and client, I preach that all the time to our team, is that you never know what's going on behind that phone call or that email. And it's our job to find out what is, right? And it's always resonated with me.
So do you think then, because this is such a deep topic, like we could go so deep into this well that we might drown, but it's I don't know that anything else that we'll talk about on the show is any more important than this. And the concept that you said earlier about, really I will just paraphrase, the number one human need is not food, water, shelter. It's the need to feel significant. And you can't feel significant on your own. You're to be made to feel significance from others in the way they treat you and interact with you. I suppose you can, depending on how you want to get into it. We can get into the faith perspective, but right. The idea behind it is how do we live our lives every day to where we're helping make other people feel seen and significant? And that has to be intentional. And it's a skill that can be developed, because we talk a lot about here is Dr. Dan Doherty, our resident PhD. He's oozing with natural empathy. It's just how he's wired. God wired him with natural empathy. I am not.
Interesting. Yeah.
So for whatever reason, I'm not. And so I have to really work hard. Not that I don't care. I care deeply. I can be moved emotionally. Like I will give my arm for people, but I don't always come up every day and I don't interact that way where he does. And so when you're coaching people out there now that are listeners, even on your team, what things do you do every day to adopt the mindset to where, again, you're like, okay, I'm on a mission for significance today, not for myself, but for others? How do you do that?
I can break it down. Maybe I remember Jimmy Buffett had a great line, is that it takes as much time to be a blank as it does to be a really good, nice person. Right.
Yeah.
Just start there. Right. Right. Simple, so that's right? Very simple. And then the second piece is, if you do good, I truly believe you feel good. So this is sort of going back to sort of that, I hate using the word selfish, but the selfish notion of, hey, if you help somebody today, it's going to make you feel good. Automatically it makes you feel, there's no doubt the endorphins feel good. I know, we have thousands and thousands of clients, and our team does an amazing job every day at trying to make that client feel special. And that's probably what I if you ask, like, what do I try to preach the most or coach the most, is just know that every interaction can be special. And it's not the other person's responsibility. It's ours. I always say, don't waste the moment, because that's how I looked at every single interaction. If you're on a phone and you're just processing, and you're wasting that moment, all you're doing is showing up. So I know, again, it sounds maybe cheesy, but I truly believe it. Like every day you have an opportunity to do good and feel good. So don't waste the moment.
Yeah, and I love it, and it sounds so simple to do. So what I want to encourage the audience to think about is, again, it's the stuff you have to be intentional about. And Pat and I haven't solved it. It's like something we have to try to work on every day as well. And when you put your head on your pillow every night, ask the question: did I make a positive impact in someone's life today? And if I did, who and how? And
Yeah.
if you can't answer that question with a positive yes, because you can retell that story, you probably didn't, right?
Real quick, I'm sorry. Never keep score. If you keep score, it will never be genuine.
But
And
Pat, I've competition in my top 5 strengths and strength finders. So you can't tell a guy like me to not keep score. What are you talking about?
and you think you're competitive? My staff would say I'm Looney Tunes, and so would my kids and stuff. And what you know what I meant, but I
Sure.
think you do. At the end of the day, it's not, again, the reason why you never keep score, in my opinion, is because if you're doing sort of the things that we're talking about regularly, you are always rewarded. And you don't have to keep score if you are, again, interested, because I just have felt very blessed in my life that most of what I give, I find it comes back to me in spades. And that's sort of just been what's resonated with me.
Well, the fact that you said that keeping score is inherently about yourself. That's the self-serving mindset. So if you're keeping score about how good you were to other people during the day, it's a bit of
Yeah, true. Yeah,
I
you're
think
right.
you might actually have the wrong mindset going into that.
Okay. All right.
That's great. I love it. So you've been able to build, you've worked in corporations where you've had, large budgets and, the machine behind you. And then you've stepped into roles where you're kind of building something from the ground up. And similarly in your role now where you've helped scale something that was kind of in between, small but mighty, and then now taking it to the next level. What have you found are consistent formulas for whether it's something you're trying to do personally, whether you're helping build a PTO, PTA rather, in your local neighborhood, or
Yeah.
coaching a kids soccer team, or building an organization, or for your family? Are there some formulas that you've come up with process wise? You're like, okay, this works. This is transferable.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, you got to be vulnerable. This is sort of the individual piece, right, of being a leader. Is I've implemented recently something that I think is really good, and I ask my top leaders that report to me. I often ask them, what am I doing? What do you want me to stop doing? What do you want me to start doing? And what do you want me to keep doing? And I think those are three, that's pretty vulnerable, right? And so if they give it back to you and you digest it and you don't argue with it, right? And it's powerful, right? So that's one thing that I know as a leader. The second thing is, as it relates to the people, I just go back to, again, everyone has a story, right? Everyone has a background, but everybody also has a trigger for what motivates them. And I encourage all of our people. You talked about empathy is not necessarily a strength, right? But you're working on it. I believe that it's maybe one of the most powerful things of being a leader and creating a successful organization, because once you start to understand, again, people's background stories and what motivates them, that driven by empathy, right? Then all of a sudden you can identify how to lead. I'm a firm believer you make it about the people. We have been lucky enough to win, I think it's 4 years in a row now at Shepherd Insurance. We've won Best Place to Work in the insurance industry. It's an unbelievable recognition, but people say, well, it's about your culture and it's about your leadership. I would argue, this might be counterintuitive, but I argue that culture is created by the people, not necessarily the leaders. If you hire the right people, if you bring the right people together, they will create a culture that's based on your leadership. And then as a leader, it's your job to foster that and to build upon that. Again, it might be counterintuitive, but that's what I think Shepherd has created, and that's what worked for us. We have a saying that we hire people of great value, positivity, can-do work ethic. And if you can do those three things, we'll teach you the insurance piece, right? But if we bring those people in and they have a family attitude, we will rise. And I think so many people try to complicate it. You must have 7 years of experience in X, Y, and Z. Well, yeah, experience helps, but it's not going to get you to what we're talking about today, right? Truly connecting with clients and having that desire to be competitive every day, right? Because we are very competitive. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's sort of how I
No,
run.
I love it. It's great. And I was thinking about the transferableness of much of what you were saying and how it applies in any situation with any organization. I mean, the start, stop, continue mindset could be something you do in your family, like as a father and a mother, and you go to your kids and say, okay, kids, as a dad, let's do it. We're going to do a quarterly stop, start, continue with dad. What do you want me to start doing more of? What do you want me to stop doing? And what do you want me to keep doing?
I'd be afraid to ask my kids because I know they would be way too honest with me on that one. But
Yeah, they'd have a long list of all of it probably, or at least the stops and the starts. But I was thinking about that from a standpoint of it takes the big word you said there, it takes a lot of vulnerability to do that. But we know that that's the key that unlocks
yeah,
not just high performance, but deep relationships with people and trust, right?
I again, based on that, I'm a part of like a CEO forum group here in Sarasota, and one of our leaders had suggested that our group identify a word that we focus in on every year. His family started this, and as his family went around the table at Christmas time, they identified a word that they were going to focus on, and and it could be self improvement, it could be family improvement, and I have found it to be really powerful. Again, being vulnerable. One of my words, like last year, was be present. So often I was coming home on the phone, or I'm meeting with somebody, I'm texting. It's just downright rude, and so sometimes. And I scored myself this year. I gave myself like a C plus, right? I was okay. I needed to be better, but it made me aware of something that I could improve upon, right? So those are simple things that I think as leaders, that if we just took a minute to sort of step back and think about, like, how, because everybody's always reading self-improvement books and stuff. Sometimes it's just right within you, it. You just got to be a little bit more interfacing and say, okay, this is what I really need to be working on.
Yeah, I love that too. And I think about it. We've had one every year at Brain Trust, our company, have a word of the year that I unveil at our Christmas party for the coming year.
Very cool.
But what you've struck in me though is I've never done that at home. I think that would be a really powerful tool to do as a family. So I love
Yeah.
that. It's great.
Yeah.
It does focus you, and it brings that awareness from the unconscious to the conscious. And I'm sitting here feeling a little bit like I got a little coaching last night. My youngest daughter's 11. She's the only one still in the house. And we like to spend some time after dinner doing whatever she wants to do. And then we usually watch a 30-minute show together and hang out. And last night we're on the couch and she's like, Dad, 11, Dad, you're going to be on your phone all night, or are we going to
Right.
watch it?
Wow.
And you're unconscious because, we're business owners and we're leaders and we got a million things going on. Your mind goes, oh, I should probably check that email and send that. And I'm like, no, this is not the time for that. I got all the rest of the night to do that. But your brain has created habits that aren't always aligned with your values.
No doubt. And easier said to change it, right? But I do believe, the one thing that I will say is the phone obviously is something that is here to stay. It's not going away, right? But don't forget, this is truly my word. Relationships are the key to success and happiness in life. Period. End of story. So again, sounds simple, but if you don't have relationships, you're never going to be successful. You're never going to be happy. And you could be money wise, you could be successful, but personally. And so, again, simple. But if we don't focus on it, and we all say it, it's just a matter of what are we doing? What are we doing about it? So
yeah, and putting people in your life that'll hold you accountable to the values that you're not potentially living out on a day-to-day basis. Not because you're so far off the reservation that you're not being the person you're supposed to be, just because we just get busy and we lose track of that sometimes. So
Yeah.
that's why I love that she held me accountable to that in that moment, right? As opposed to just sitting there and stewing on it,
Right.
and then going to bed feeling like daddy doesn't care.
And it's funny you say it, because my beautiful bride Jane of 33 years, I mean, she gets me. She understands, how driven and everything. And it only takes one little comment, right? Of like,
Right.
really? Are you gonna be on your, really? And it's exactly what your 11-year-old did. My
Right.
wife, never ever complains. She's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. But if she has just one little comment, I'm like, wow, I gotta call timeout, right?
Right.
So
Yep. That's great. Well, as we kind of bring the plane for the landing here, I know that you're passionate also about finding ways of, both as a company at Shepherd, but also you personally at supporting and giving back and finding ways to bring purpose into the lives around us. I know you got a bunch of nonprofits that you guys support and also that you're invested in personally, but you've got one or two that you're really kind of thinking about right now that are new. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing on the kind of purpose-driven side of your business right now.
sure. Interesting. I don't know if we fell into it here in Sarasota at Shepherd Insurance, but I think it really goes back to, again, my desire to be interested in the community and help people. I think we were talking earlier. We insure about just over 40 nonprofits. It's a niche that we specialize in. But one of the things that I also love about what we do is for almost every one of those nonprofits, we immediately say, how can we support your cause, either monetarily, but most importantly, how can we do it with our staff? You and I didn't talk about this, but we have something here. It's called shepherding. And we actually give our employees 2 days off every year to dedicate to their nonprofit and or charitable causes. And so we're walking the walk, makes a huge difference. Again, you can't imagine how excited a staff member is when they come back from a nonprofit or charitable organization event. They rise. And I just tell people all the time, if you haven't done it and you haven't spent time, just try it once on a cause that you might be excited about, and it'll be game changing for you. One of the ones it's actually just sort of resonating with me right now is, and we insure this cause. It's called Project 180. It's based here in Southwest Florida. It's a very interesting and unique organization. They actually help transition men who have been institutionalized for whatever theft, drug addiction, mostly addiction, and they help them get back into the community. People have always said, "Oh, it's so easy. All they got to do is try harder and be better." Well, think about this: when these folks get off the bus, right? Usually they're taking a bus ride. 9 times out of 10, they have zero money. Their family is probably either gone or deserted them because of what they've done, right? They have no job. They don't have a driver's license anymore. And oh, by the way, to top all that off, one of the things I've learned by working with this group is they walk out of prison with on average, $13,000 in debt, because while they're in prison, we actually charge them for some of their food and housing, and believe it or not, it's not all like free in jail. So what this project does is, the minute they walk off the bus, there's somebody there to greet them, to help them get a meal, to help them get clothing and housing, and then to absolutely get them started up with a job. And then so it resonates, right? Because who then is going to hire these folks, right? And so as a society and as a community, we have to be willing and open to help people, no matter sort of what that background was. And if these folks are trying to change, and man, their stories are so powerful, you can't imagine. If we help just one person rehabilitate themselves and think about what we've done in our community and our environment. So super passionate about it, love it. And again, if you just spend a little time with them, you can't help but say, how do I help?
That's awesome. So that's Project 180. And where can folks go to learn more about your business, but also connect with you personally?
Obviously, would love to hear from anybody on LinkedIn. Shepherd Insurance is shepherdins.com. We're based out of Carmel, Indiana.
Roundabout capital of America.
That's right. That's right. Very good. We're almost, I think we're approaching 50 years in business. We're in 40 plus locations across the United States, 7 different states, got about 500 employees now, and would love to help people with their insurance needs, whether it be on the personal side, the business side, employee benefits, and we actually even have a financial services organization, and just got ranked top 40 in the United States. Very proud of that as well. So we'd love to help anybody we can with those needs.
That's fantastic. Well, Pat, this has been great. I feel like we need to schedule 2 or 3 of these episodes. We could dive into so many different topics, so many different ways. But I've learned a lot from you today, from your story, and I'm sure the listeners have as well, and a lot of practical stuff that we can actually go intentionally put in place. So thank you for sharing that with us, and for just in general being a guest on the Drive and Change podcast.
Appreciate it, Jeff, so much. And love the connection with you as well. Thank you.